You ever feel like you're heading down the wrong path? And a feeling comes along, it's like, I don't know if this is where I want to be going. I don't know if this is what I want to have happening. And there's an expression that people attribute to Ernest Holmes: change your thinking, change your life. Well, if you're headed down the wrong path, you don't like the path that you're on, just change your thinking, change your path, and your life changes. Sounds so simple. Yeah, there's some nuance that's involved there, because this is not easy. This is not necessarily an easy thing to do. Somebody who has often said, the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And what we can do is we can change the way that we do anything. We can change the way we do everything. But it doesn't necessarily all happen at once. And it doesn't really matter what it is that we want to be changing. And you're talking about weight loss or fitness. There's the thought, well, okay, I need to go to the gym. And if you go to the gym for the first time and you haven't been to the gym in forever, and you try and lift more than you can lift, you're not going back to the gym for a while. You're either going to be staying at home going, ouch, or otherwise be sidelined. And even if you do manage to lift what it is that you're lifting, you got to go back again. You got to go to the gym one more time. You know, I know people who have dropped a ton of weight. Several of us that are on this Zoom right now. I'm currently 120 something pounds less than I was at my peak. And I did not lose 120 pounds in a weekend. It took a while. And then it's taking some attention to keep it going. The same thing happens with lots of different areas in our life. And the reason that I bring this up is because of vectors. Now, the way a vector works is if you imagine yourself standing in a particular place and you're going to be heading east, you can walk east and you're going to go all the way around the planet to the east, or till you get to whatever you're going to be getting to. And if you turn just 1 degree south or north and start walking, the first few steps, not going to make much of a difference. The first block or so, not going to make that much of a difference. You go long enough, though, it winds up making a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. When the lunar missions were coming back from the moon, the just tiniest change in that trajectory, the little tiny vector from the distance of 250,000 miles or to however far away it is to the moon, that little tiny difference is the difference between getting home and being lost in space. So what we need to do in any of the activities that we're involved in, yes, and you might not be planning a lunar mission of your own, so there's different things that are going on. Perhaps it has something more to do with a relationship or finances. What you want to do is start with the awareness of where you are. Am I heading down the wrong path? And then be intentional that I want to change that. I want my experience to be something different. And then make a nudge in that direction. And then persist. You get to keep it up. You get to go back to the gym one more time. You get to stay on whatever that weight management program was. If the program is a workable program, then when you work the program works. And that applies to all sorts of things. And don't take input from the world around you about how it's not working or you need to be doing something different. There was a time back when GPSs were relatively new and they weren't built into everybody's phone. Or I think you can get a toaster now with a GPS built into it. And I was working, we were in Orlando, and we had to go to Daytona for a meeting. And the rental car company rented us this GPS, and we thought, well, we're going to get that because we need to make sure that we get to the right place when we were in Daytona, because we didn't know anything about Daytona. I didn't realize there was a really crappy GPS. It was like a cell phone that had a little program attached to it. This was well before smartphones. This was pretty much well before stupid phones. And this thing was not very well informed. The reason I bring that up is because if you've ever traveled between Orlando and Daytona, there's a road that's relatively slow that goes straight between them. And then there is also the Florida Turnpike, which goes south, and then you can get on another one that goes west. And it winds up being all highways for the entire trip, and no traffic lights and no traffic, or minimal traffic. So the GPS suggested that we go down the straight road. I was like, well, we're not going to do that. And because we knew how to get back to Orlando. And so we got onto the Florida Turnpike and started heading south. And the GPS was not going to take our change of direction. It said, you need to turn around and go back to where you got on the turnpike and continue down the straight road that takes you all the way there. Unfortunately, the next exit where we could turn around on the Florida Turnpike was the one that we were going to take anyway to go to Orlando. So this GPS kept insisting that we needed to go down to where we were headed, go back, and then take a detour through the area that we didn't want to go. It was trying to vector us, and it was doing the best that it could, but it was woefully inadequate. And that's just such a wonderful reminder that as much as you want to follow the guidance, maybe the guidance isn't exactly what you should be following. Maybe there's a little bit more to be aware of. Maybe there's a little bit more that's going on instead of just blindly following the instructions that you've been given. So the way that you do anything is the way that you do everything. And when you get that nudge in the direction that you want to be going, then it can help. We were talking during the telling prayer work stories, is we learn this technique of doing practical prayer, of turning our awareness to the infinite power and presence that creates everything, and then identifying that we are part of that one, that divine mind that knows all, that creative power that creates everything, that infinite love that shares itself as everything. That is the truth of what we are as well. And with that knowledge, we can set a new intention and invite that power to create something new in our lives. And it does. The last two steps of the prayer are about gratitude, being thankful for the good, for the awareness of the process, and then being able to release that, to let it go, and to let that creative law head off in a new direction. So that's the nudge, and that's the vector. And when we are setting about to deepen our spiritual practice, our level of spirituality, do it. Persist. As we heard today, you don't necessarily have to do the full-blown prayer if you get yourself into the state of, this is who I am, and I'm following my spiritual practice all the time. Don't put it on autopilot. Keep on doing it. And then what happens is we tend to be more spiritually minded. We tend to be more in the flow of having that new experience unfold in a way that's in harmony and accord with what we're looking for. Same thing happens with our finances. Can we pray for money? It's a big question that people who are not involved in New Thought ask. Can we pray for money? Yes, we can pray for money. But we don't specifically pray for money. Because if we pray for money, then what we're going to wind up needing probably is more money. So the money shows up along the way as a reminder that it's an infinite universe. But what we really want to do is have balance in our finances. So we want to nudge ourselves in the direction of being in that place of balance. That may look like a job that pays a lot more money. It may look like a dramatic change in our living expenses and our experience. It could show up in lots and lots of different ways. But when we then find ourselves in a place of balance where the amount that's available is more than enough to meet the requirements that we have, as a friend of mine said, when you get to the first of the month and you don't notice it, that's wealthy. It's about making a nudge and then persisting. You know, if we're putting money into a savings account or a 401k, it doesn't help to do that once. Do that again, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again, and let that continue to improve. It works in everything. It works in our workplace. How many people do you know who say, "Oh, I always find that I'm working for a jerk. My boss is always such a tyrant," or "My coworkers never respect me," or X, Y, or Z. People waste my time. And I have been in awful workplaces. which have been hostile and toxic and unpleasant and so forth. And I don't work in any of those anymore. But when I notice myself having a pattern, the thing that the thing that all those bad workplaces had in common was me. So the nudge is, okay, what experience do I want to have instead? What kind of a workplace do I want to be involved in? And oh, by the way, let me become aware if I am the sort of person who belongs in a workplace like that. Because if I like to be a bull in a china shop and tell everybody exactly what they should be doing and boss them around, but I don't like to be in an environment where somebody is pushing and bossing around and acting like a bull in a china shop, then there's a disconnect. I need to figure out what it is that I want to have. I want to be aware of what I'm bringing to it, and then set the intention of whatever change is going to happen. Ditto in relationships. So if I want to be in this wonderful, mutually respectful, loving, kind, uplifting relationship, and I don't want to change anything about the way that I've been doing stuff, and I don't want to hang around with any new people, well, okay, you guys can see where the problem is there. So it is about awareness and intention. And the really important thing is that the intention is huge. Setting a new intention, having an intention for something to be changing is amazing. We did the class on living untethered. And as we're going through the book and going through the class, the question kept coming up. It's like, well, how do we make this stuff work in our life? How do we get into this place of living untethered? And when we got to the part of the book where he's explaining what you do, he says, intention is the big thing. There is not a formula for how you make these changes. The big thing is to set the intention to make the changes and then persist. Okay, it is my intention to have this experience in my life change. There's something for me to do. There's a step for me to take. I'm going to take a step in that direction. And it might be just a little off from where I've been headed before. And then I'm going to keep moving in that direction. Instead of going off that way and then coming back to what I've always done, I want to let the change happen. Let the small change become a bigger change, become a bigger change. And that awareness is, if I think I'm heading down the wrong path, instead of just beating myself up for being on the wrong path, what I really want to do is see what path I'd rather be on, and then check in from time to time. I'm heading in my new direction. I've chosen my new path. This is the path that I'm going to be on. Do not assume that you were right, that you had it exactly right the first time. The thing about those lunar missions is they kept on adjusting course on the way back. A little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, a little high, a little low, to make sure that they came in exactly where they needed to as they re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. So checking in to maintain that level of awareness. Is this the path that I want to be on now? Yes? Great. Continue stepping into, this is the direction I want to go in. That's where I'm going to persist. No, still not right. Now, the whole Goldilocks story. This one's too hard, this one's too soft, this one's just right. Okay, find the one that's just right, and then continue to work that part of the program. Because you can. We've all, seen huge ships, and they make really, really large turns. And it's possible, if you got a ship that's heading out across the ocean, you make a little tiny 1 degree, 2 degree change. It doesn't seem like it's going to take that much, but over time and over distance, that ship goes into a completely different location than it was going to. Had an experience of a ship in Baltimore not going in the direction that it wanted to be going in. Would have been much better to have turned a little bit to the left. Okay, they would have. There was circumstances that they didn't. But that's an example of what can happen when we're not paying attention, when we're not empowering ourselves and being aware and intentional about the direction that we're going to be going in. You want to be in a loving relationship? Be a loving person. Be the sort of person who acts the way that you want other people to treat you, and it turns on the law of attraction in a magnificent way. And suddenly, people who you'd never met before start showing up, or people who you've known forever start being nice to you. Go figure. Go figure. There are people, and I think the advances in technology had a lot to do with people not carrying a lot of cash around, and then the pandemic reinforced that a lot. But there are people who would take the change out of their pocket at the end of the day and put it in a jar. And it's just, take the change and put it in a jar. It got to the point where at the Wawa, there was a little donate thing next to every cash register. So if you got your change, you can just donate it to Feeding the Hungry or whatever their charity happened to be. And one of the things that I noticed is that those were always full because people would take their change and rather than put it back in their pocket, they'd just donate it. Well, if you take, the 4 cash registers that are at every Wawa and every Wawa that exists everywhere and multiply that out by all the people who are leaving their spare change, it is a much larger version of what happens when you take the change and you put it in the jar at the end of every day. Because when you do that for a day, you've got 70 cents. And you do that for a month and you got a few dollars. But if you do that for a few years, you got a nice weekend away or maybe a vacation for the family. And that's the small change. That's the way that the small change can happen. So be present and involved and engaged in the small changes. And most importantly, being intentional. Being intentional and being aware of what it is that's going on. The awareness is huge. I was reading the description of what I said I was going to be talking about today, which was going to be small change, but it's about small changes allowing us to be free from those big, sudden, dramatic, oh my God, how did this happen changes. And they're different ends of the same spectrum. If we're intentional about where we are and where we want to be, then those big dramatic changes don't tend to come along, or they don't tend to be as dramatic. We get to be engaged in the process of life. And when something does come along, instead of throwing us completely off balance because we've been involved in our spiritual practice and we've become aware of who we are, we know what we can bring to it. So there's a lot. And next time you find yourself with a pocket full of change, you get to be intentional about that too. Change is at hand. And you can change the way you do anything and allow that to change the way that you do everything. And allow and invite and create more good in your life and then thereby in the world around you and the lives of the people you come in contact with. Let that be our truth as we're moving forward from today. Go for it. You deserve it. So it is.